get up and miss all those meetings and get dropped at this point in the semester. So I try to do that right when I'm thinking about it. Okay. Okay. These, like I said, these are getting, they may not be getting all that much longer, but the organization of these paragraphs is getting a little more complicated. Remember that very first one that we looked at when I gave you that, what I called the diagnostic, the very first day we were here, and it was about why we buy things, okay? And one of the questions I asked you, if you get that out now and look back at it, you'll see that one of the questions I asked you was what's the topic and what's the main idea, okay? And then I asked you what was the organization of the paragraph, okay? So that's kind of what we're moving into now, is being aware of these different types of organization. If I asked you what the organization of this is, it's compare, contrast. It also has a list. And as we know now, that this is interesting. This is, we're going to get into organization, the actual names of it. This is a list. This is just a list. This is compare, contrast. A lot of compare, contrast ones today. Understanding that can kind of help you figure out what's going on, okay? This is really just a list. I guess it has some compare contrast because it's comparing the different types of plotting properties. No paragraph is just one type. It has a bunch of other stuff in it. But the overall, the main organization of this, the main organization is probably a list, okay? So this word, what I was getting to is, this word is kind of a good clue. This is going to compare, you can tell this first sentence is a question. So this is going to, we hope, this is asking the question for you. This is going to give you the answer to this question. How does U.S. family leave policy compare with that in other countries? Does everyone understand what that question is asking? No, good. Good. Diana, I'm glad you are shaking your head because a lot of people don't want to admit that they don't understand what that means. That's what I need you guys to do, is get over that idea of, yeah, I'm afraid to say I don't understand what that means. If you don't understand what it means, you've got to figure it out or you're not going to be able to understand the paragraph. Okay, there's a vocabulary word here. What is family leave policy? What is that? Does anyone know what that is?
Let's say if you had a family emergency, if you're working in a company, you can apply for a family leave. I don't know how to really put into it.
Right, no, but you're on the right track. It has to do with people who work for, mostly for bigger corporations. A lot of small companies don't offer it. But there are more and more rules nowadays that they have to, that they can't, in other words, you can't fire somebody just because they had to take off work because of a family emergency, okay? So that's the point going on here. There's more and more official rules for this. So yeah, family leave policy means that you have to take leave, which is another word in a company for an absence. You have to have an absence to have to do with your family. Now, as we read into this, we find that the specific type of leave they're talking about is what? We see they're talking about parents, children, parents, infants, parents, child. What specific family event are we talking about here in this paragraph? Yeah, okay, good, and exactly. This is, again, this is that politically correct. Have you guys heard that phrase? They used to call this.
Is this talking about like the human circle?
What?
Like, is that like about the human circle?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, the human cycle.
The human cycle.
Is that like the human cycle, like from beginning to the end?
Well, do you see that mentioned anywhere in here?
Yeah, like from birth until someone dies? Like it's talking about the cycle, sort of,
I don't see any
right?
mention of death in here. Yeah, what you gotta be doing is looking for what's in the paragraph. What do you see? That's why you've got to go through here and look for this stuff. See what's repeated. What's repeated here are parents and children. So what they're talking about here is, yeah, you said pregnancy leave. What we used to call it was, in my day, it was called this, maternity leave, which is basically the same thing, okay? But what's happened is, the reason they don't call it politically correctly, you're not supposed to call it maternity leave anymore, is because the father can also have this leave, okay? That was the shift from the 60s until now, that it was only the mother who could get this time off before. Nowadays, because fathers are more, there's more of an incidence of fathers caring for their children. Now the father can also take maternity leave, but that sounds kind of weird, so they now call it family leave, okay? But it's true that in many places, family leave can also be if somebody dies or if there's an emergency or something, okay? Yeah, so that, we gotta figure that out. How does the U.S., what's the word policy? What does that mean? The policy, the rules?
Like the rules.
The rules, yeah. How do these rules, how does the United States rules for maternity leave compare with that in other countries? This kind of throws people.
Yeah, it depends on the culture, right?
Well, that's what we're.
Or the situation.
That's what this is gonna tell us. We can't just say it depends on the culture. We have to read what this says and understand what this is telling us, okay? So this is a pronoun that refers back to this. So what this says is, how does the rule for people taking off time when a baby is born
It's talking about.
compare to that rule in other countries? Okay, go ahead.
It's talking about different countries and their policies for it. That's like
Okay.
comparing the different policies.
Yeah, good. That's what we're trying to figure out here. Okay, so here's what we will probably have. Do we have this kind of a list? And this is what you kind of want to do. Again, your annotation doesn't have to be perfect. If it doesn't turn out to be this, we'll cross that out, okay? Most industrialized countries have much more generous policies than those in the United States, providing not only more extended leaves of absence, but also financial support. That's the thing, in America, very often, yeah, you can take time off, but they don't pay you for it. All they do is guarantee you have your job when you come back, but they don't necessarily pay you. Some people, some do. We have here, they pay you up to a certain point. I know Mrs. Gerard in the English Center just had a baby last year, and they paid her, I think, for X number of months. And now she's still taking some time off. She's no longer getting paid for it, but she has a reduced schedule. But she still has her job. That's the thing, they can't fire you. It used to be that before this law came in, they could just say, okay, if you're gonna have a baby, then goodbye. You know, if you're not gonna be here, too bad. You have to go find another job after you have a baby. Now they can't do that anymore. Okay, so U.S. doesn't give a whole lot of extended leaves of absence and maybe doesn't provide some financial support. But here's the thing. Does this have a clear cut, if we're going to look at these two things, does it have a clear cut list of what the U.S. does and what other countries do?
No.
No. and then we find out, oh, I see, yeah, it's not giving me as much information as I wanted. It's not saying the US does this, this, and this. However, these other countries do this, this, and this. What does it? What is the list here?
Other countries and their leave policy?
Yeah, it's giving us a sample. So we probably say, okay, I'm not seeing this, but I'm seeing the other countries. In Sweden, Germany, and France, one parent can take a paid infant care leave supported by the employer or a social insurance fund. So one parent can take off, and the employer pays for it. Supported means it's paid, okay? So this is Sweden, Germany, and France. Okay, one parent paid with money. Okay, again, whatever you have to, whatever notes you make, one parent with money, that's my note. If both parents choose to continue to work, they are guaranteed access to high-quality daycare. Okay, so that's another thing, right? Okay, in Sweden, either the mother or father is entitled to a 12-month paid leave. So they're going to pay you for a whole, yeah, Ivana's shaking her head. You have prior knowledge of this, right? With a child. Yeah, there's nothing like this. We wish they had this in the United States. Yeah, this makes us realize maybe we'll move to Sweden. Okay, so yeah, 12 months with money.
And here, I think they did this like 6
It depends here. Yeah, it depends. I know MPCs is pretty generous. Other places are not so generous. It just depends on where you work. I think the bigger corporations are probably better at it than some of the smaller companies, but even then, it's, yeah, and that's I think that's the problem. They've said, I think all they've really said is you can't fire somebody just for being pregnant. You have to let them keep their job. But there's no real one rule that says you have to give them 6 months or you have to pay them or whatever. Yeah, and this is, this is another one of these things that would be an interesting research paper to find out exactly what the rule is and how it's changed. Yes, Sandra.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off topic here, but so for a woman, if she's pregnant, it's against the law to fire her
Yes.
in America?
Yes. Just because she's pregnant. Yeah.
When did that change happen, that rule, the policy happen?
That's another thing that you could look up for to do some more research on this. And these are good questions.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
No, exactly. And these are, because we don't have this, we realize it's not telling us these U.S. rules. Here's our questions. What are the U.S. rules? When were they enacted? Yeah, so you want to write this over here, because this is another one of those things that really brings up a lot of questions, and that you can go and look that up. Does that make sense? So Sandra, write this down. What are the rules? When did they come in? I remember that it happened, but I want to say 20 years ago, but I could be way off. Okay? Okay. Then the parent on leave is reimbursed for the first 9 months following the birth, $150 for the next 3 months, and then allowed to continue until the child is 18 months old. So very, we can put this down, other payments to 18 months. Again, these are details. You don't have to get every single one of those, but what we're working at is seeing what this is a list of. Okay? So what's our topic? Yes,
Other countries, family
okay,
policy.
good. Other countries, and be careful here, this is what's called a plural possessive. The family leave policy of other countries. So it's other, the plural of countries is COUNTRIES, and then the family leave policy belongs to those countries. What is it telling us about other countries' family leave policies? Anybody?
Other countries are more generous with their family leave policies than the United States.
Good, that's it, because what we saw here, now remember, one of the reasons I do this is a right answer, and it's Michelle's answer, but if you just copy down my abbreviations, I'm gonna mark you off a little bit, because don't just copy this, you have to spell it out. I'm doing it for the time here. What we saw up here is, even though we didn't have this, we could put in our list up here, not as good, all right? That's the US answer, not as good. The other countries have this. And this is kind of interesting. How many other countries are there in the world? Thousands, right? So this is only really talking about 3 countries. Where are those countries? Where are Sweden, France, and Germany? They're in Europe.
In Europe.
Okay, so we might even narrow this, you could even do this. It looks like the only examples, they're not giving us Kenya or Rwanda or something. Okay. These are European countries are more generous. You could say that too, but other countries is fine. Does that make sense to people? Yeah, same thing.
So-
Look for a list. If you don't get a list, then cross it out. You don't have to have a list.
So I thought Europe was a family, not just like European countries. Like I thought they were all a family, like they have kings and queens, so they're like a
No,
royal
different
family.
countries. No, Europe is a continent. It's, the countries are all different. Don't lump them in with each other. The individual countries will not appreciate that. If you're from France, you're from France, and if you're from Spain, you're from Spain. And don't ever lump England in with it. England is its own country.
But I meant like, like in Greece, they moved over and they spread around the world, and then they're in Spain, they spread around some more, and there's kings and queens, and it kind of became like they all spread
But they are
around in
all
Europe.
still definitely independent countries with their own
Like a
independent government.
Family.
Yeah. And the idea of the euro, do people know what the euro is?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the money. It's like
It's-
double
yeah.
than the U.S.,
There
right?
finally is, just recently, one money. So you don't have French francs and Swiss francs. But a lot of those countries were not happy about that. They did not like losing their money. And England refused to go in it. England flat out refused. They said, no, we are not going in this. There was a lot of dissension about going to that one currency. It certainly makes things easier if you're traveling over there, because believe me, has anyone ever traveled in Europe? When I went over,
Yeah.
and every time, because the countries are small. I mean, if here's us, you can travel all the way across here and still be using dollars. But can you see all these little bitty different colors? This is what we're talking about right here. You can see all these little bitty different colors. If you're traveling, every time you cross into one of these different colors, you had to change your money into a different currency. It was a nightmare. So that's why, so this area now has one currency. But these people said, no, we're not, we have our own money. So yeah, it wasn't a 100% popular thing. They want to keep their country identity. Okay, now, anyone have
Is it
trouble?
still the same today? Like, so England still has their own money?
Yep. So what is going on here? Anyone have trouble with this one? Yeah, this is a tricky one. And part of the tricky things
Is it
here
talking about
is-
groups?
What?
Let's talk about different groups,
It's
right?
about groups, that's good, okay. This is, yeah, there's something to do, let's write that down here, okay? But that's a pretty general word, right? And one of the problems here is that it doesn't really, yeah, groups is what's.
Like
that
about
word is-
farmers?
Yeah, but what groups? Yeah, okay? So we have to go back and do our thing to take it apart. Okay. We see that groups are mentioned. Okay, do you see any kind, just glancing over it, do you see a list? Do you see any kind of list going on? Do we see also and, first, second, third? Yeah, same
Which?
with- What?
The word which?
Which isn't one of our addition transitions. Which is just a pronoun. What about this? Yes.
Where it says these organizations, like the many groups that follow.
Okay, good. Exactly. What about this? Here's a first. Okay, and good. The farmers groups were followed by, yeah, exactly. Now we're seeing a kind of a list, okay? First, so we're not sure what we're doing here, but we're gonna try to start, we just gotta start doing this. Farmers groups, and what's the second kind of group? Labor unions. What's a labor union? Anyone ever belong to a labor union? Very often I get people raising their hands and saying yes. I belong to a labor union. I belong to the California Teachers Association. That's the union that what they do is they protect workers' rights, okay? That's why I'm not supposed to let more than 28 people into this class. Because according to them, if we have more than 28 people, it's too much work for me to grade papers. That's the way they work. The union says I cannot let more than 28 people into the class. Okay. The union is, I've been discussing with Rosario and Sandra and Mark. The union is the people that says that supportive services has to supply event. They can't ask me to go out and get an interpreter for it, because that creates more work for the teacher. So supportive services supplies event. So that's what a labor union is. It's something that comes around. Not necessarily, we don't always agree with all of it, but the union says, here are the rules for your work, okay? This is more talking about people, the biggest labor unions were the people who worked in the steel mills, the automotive industry, that kind of thing, were most of the labor unions, okay? So that's one list. What's another list? Yeah.
About the development in response to the change
Good, okay.
with the economy and the technology and the politics.
Good, okay, so it's giving it, there's also a list of years, right? Late 1800s, 1867, late 1800s, 1870s. Yeah, it's one of those lists that kind of goes back and forth, but we're seeing that this was in the 1800s, 1870s, okay? So I'm going to put 1867 to 1870s. This is what's kind of going on here. Okay, so it gives us a list of the two kinds of groups, farmers and then labor unions, okay? And then, yes, it gives us a list of why they were organized. social, economic, technological, political conditions. They developed in response to the Depression, okay? Labor unions developed after the Industrial Revolution created a wage labor force. Anybody know about the Industrial Revolution in America? Anybody study that in history? You will, because that's an important thing. That was when there were farmers, before we had any kind of equipment. You know, farmers were still out there with their horses pulling plows. Then, when we started the first wave of technology, you guys think of technology as this stuff, but even, you know, a tractor, even something that you didn't have to have the horses, or you know, you could pull a cotton picker or something. That was a form of technology. Also the mills, the things that made cloth, those were technology. So when they started getting this kind of technology, and people started to go to work in factories rather than work on farms, that's what they're talking about here. Okay, so this is a little bit broad, and what we have to kind of do here is kind of take their word for it. The development of formal interest group organizations. So they're talking about formal interest group organizations. I might say, because we're talking about people who work on farms and people who work in factories, and that's kind of a stretch. I'd say workers' groups. But this is one of these things that if you just had groups here, that will work if you have this one. So what is it telling us about these groups? Here's where the two kinds, first and second, farmers and labor. And then Sandra's right. The next thing tells us why. These were organized in these years. Why? Can we, yeah, Sandra?
For example, like the development in response to, like, you know, like clothes, like, is that what it's about, like from
Yeah.
the 18?
How
Yeah.
can we, well, here's the thing, how can we take, so this part, this is telling us when, this is telling us why. How can we take all that information and kind of get it into one sentence? Here's the thing you can do. Get started on that sentence. We can do this part, right? Who or what is doing the action here? The groups, okay? So just to use my word here, I'm going to say workers' groups. Again, this is plural possessives. What is the action they did?
They were the human industrial, or they were in the industry, right? Working in the,
Okay, but
And
they
the-
just, what they did the action of to begin with was just being, right? Workers' groups were started when, and here's another thing you can add to this list. This is the basic of it, but you can also add these words, which is what we need to do here. Whoops, that's not right. I have a terrible time writing and talking at the same time. So you see how that works? Once you put these two, who or what is doing what, then you can add things. When? Yeah.
I put workers groups form organizations to develop change in America.
Good, okay, yeah. Because this is what's going on here, is America is growing. If you know anything about these years, okay? Yeah, workers' groups were started, and you can put the time in the I don't know whether this is late. I would call this 67. I would call this mid 1800s. I'm kind of paraphrasing what Yvonne said. As America was developing. Because that's what's going on here, right? The social, economic, technological, and political conditions. There was a depression, and then the Industrial Revolution created a permanent wage labor force. What does this mean? That's another one of those things like formal interest. What does that mean? Created a permanent wage labor force. People who are working on farms, if you owned your farm, did you get paid a wage? Did you get paid by the hour if you own a farm? No. So when these industries, when they started building these factories, and people started going to work in the factories, now you have a labor force, a group of people who are being paid by the hour. That's what this means. So that, yeah, so this is, we're talking about the development of America from a farming country to an industrial country, is what's going on. And the money issues, the depression. This is a tough one. This, you kind of have to have a little bit of prior knowledge about what was going on in the country at this time, the changeover from just working on farms to all these factories, all these buildings. This would work as America was changing. I mean, America's always changing. Is that kind of what you said, Yvonne?
Yeah.
Anybody get anything really different? Here's the thing, okay, we could list all these changes. But again, what I want you to think in terms of is not getting bogged down in those details. Just like in the Jackie Robinson thing. The best thing to do here was to, here's another one. This wasn't great, but it's better than, this was better than trying to list out all that business about Hank Greenberg trying to beat Babe Ruth's record and they wouldn't let him and all this stuff. She said, both faced things that made a bond and friendship between them. Okay, that's not quite, that's too much grouping. Even if she had just said both face racism, okay, that's a better word there. That would have worked. But just things isn't gonna, so you don't want to say writers groups, workers groups were started in the mid-1800s in response to a bunch of things. That's not quite good enough. You want to say what it is, the changes in America, okay? But you don't need to get into all that detail in either your main article or your summary. Okay, this one was probably pretty easy. What made this one easy? Remember the Venus flytrap? This is very similar to that Venus flytrap. What kind of organization was that? Remember how the flytrap opens, gets the insect, moves it? Isn't this the same? Yeah. So the topic is obviously hookworms. What is, the hookworm is doing what? Hookworms get into the body and cause, yeah, right, okay, yeah, that one, after this one was probably, oh yeah, this is, and that's what I'm hoping, is that you see, that, you're saying, yeah, this isn't that hard to figure out, I can figure this one out. Okay, all right, so let's see how you did on the last three. Let's go ahead and put them in. If you have trouble with those, well, I think the only one there might have been this one. And then if we need to look at these again on Thursday, we will. If you're one of the people who needs to go to the reading center and there's some kind kind of form they have down there, you have to get it, bring it back to me to sign. Come on Thursday prepared to write something about cars.
About cause? Oh,
Not that. This is a hint.
Oh,
as to what-
cars,
Yeah,
cars.
that's a hint as to what your writing is gonna be on Thursday.
okay, thank you.